Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This week for Vintage Books Live, we have several contributors and the editor to a book that came out over the summer called Practicing Liberation. Um, this is the art copy, so it looks close to the final copy, but not exactly right. The subtitle is Transformative Strategies for Collective Healing and Systems Change, which sounds like a mouthful, but I think I'll let the folks that are here talk about it. I don't think it's quite as scary as it sounds. I'm going to start with Tessa Hicks Peterson. She was one of the editors, and I'm always curious, especially with a book, a piece that has been edited that multiple people have contributed to. Two kind of sub questions of how did you come up with the idea for the book? And you can give kind of an overview of what the idea for the book was and how you came up with that, and then just a little bit of how you thought about who you were going to invite to contribute.
Sure. Thank you so much. Really happy to be here with you all tonight. And so I feel like the idea of the book came to me rather than me coming up with it. And I'll explain that because I've been working in social movements and education and community building my whole life. And in all the organizations and movements I've been a part of, from small grassroots collectives to big nonprofits, we run into a lot of the challenges that, even though we're trying to make change in the world around issues of justice and peace and liberation and love, sometimes we reenact the very challenges of those injustices and acting outside of those ways of being in our own organizations and our own daily life, because we're part of these systems and these dominant norms we've inherited, and we act them out sometimes in our organizations and really are replicating the models that we're trying to change. And I think that's a natural repercussion of being really well socialized into systems of domination. So it's not a surprise, but it is something that really limits our work and also limits our wellness. Our taking care of ourselves and each other and our organizations and the growth of change that we want to see in the world shouldn't be limited, and we should have full range to do the work, with all of the interconnectedness of our communities and the strength and beauty of that collective. So I saw this happening in most every organization I've worked with, and it's always a struggle within my own self and talked about with many colleagues, and also the impacts of trauma and how the traumas of injustice really are alive and well in ourselves and our bodies and our movements, and how we can really address them so that we can come through with well-being and resilience. And this has been going on since the beginning of time. So this is nothing new, but for me in particular, this project came about from working with a set of organizations in the region that I'm a part of in Southern California. Vanessa, who's here with me today, and myself and a few other folks, we worked as a collaborative to really talk about these issues with organizations locally. And so that was the impetus. How does this come up for you in your work? How does it come up? Urgency, stress, scarcity, power and privilege, and navigating those terms, and how do we deal with really trying to do this work in a good way, and facing all the limitations that come from living in a society that really struggles with so much violence and discrimination internally and externally. And we talked to people and heard about their challenges as well as their strengths and their assets, and the tools and the practices and the ways that they fought that back, and the ways that they did care for each other, even in the face of crisis, and the way they did use radical imagination to imagine a better world, even in the midst of suffering. And so we learned a lot from these organizations. We did research, we did focus groups and interviews and healing circles and talking sessions. And they told their challenges as well as their strengths with this work. And so we brought in workshops and trainings to try to address the things they wanted to address and learn about, and bolster the ones they were already doing. And at the end of all of that, it was about a 2-year process. The folks we worked with said, this is great, but we want more. We want to take this with us and give it out with the people we work with. And, here's a book that we wrote about it based on those requests and interests from people, as well as a workbook that goes with it. And these are practices and tools that people can actually put into practice in day-to-day work, in day-to-day life, in day-to-day relationships, And it was born from folks saying, yes, we want and need this, and give us more, and something tangible, and a book that we can afford, and practices we can just do on a
Right.
day. So that idea came to us from community with sort of a charge and an invitation. And that was the impetus for me in the book. And then to invite all the folks, we worked with a lot of folks in that 2-year process. Jacoby was one of them. We said, hey, Jacoby, he's a dear colleague of mine, and he has been doing really beautiful work at the intersections of mindfulness, yoga, social justice, healing, and wellness. And I said, can you bring those tools to folks? And so a number of people who we asked to be involved with our process came. And then afterwards I said, hey, let's put a book together. And everyone said yes. And so there we go.
Yay. That's always nice.
So here we are.
So when you, it's a big, it's a big subject. There's so much to it. How did you think about bringing sort of what can be kind of this overwhelming thing? How did you think about bringing that into, I mean, essentially the essays are bite-sized pieces. How did you think about how am I going to bring this down to manageable chunks and what, so that people can take things that are meaningful, but in pieces that are accessible. How did you think about condensing some of these ideas into smaller pieces? And then also, how did you decide what to include when probably you could have put together at least 3 books on the same subject, I'm imagining. Um, how did you decide what was the most important things to include?
I would say that I really trusted the community partners that I worked with. So I know each of the people who did on this and the work they did. And I really just said, what would you like to share for people in the community, in the world, teachers, social workers, activists, organizers, lay people, each from leaders to novices in this work, help us like really have the knowledge and the tools and practices for thinking about these topics of, like you said, they're big topics, transformative
Yeah.
strategies,
Yeah.
collective healing, and system change. And I really just sort of offered that prompt to the folks, and I trusted in their knowledge and wisdom and practice that they would bring forth something that they felt was useful and important. And every single one did in such a beautiful way. And then I really just sort of worked with my co-collaborator, Hala Corey, who couldn't be with us tonight, but we just sort of try to bring them into a flow. So we have like frameworks and theoretical foundations, and then we have practices, and then we have like narratives and dreaming about liberatory futures. And so the flow of the book came out of what people offered to us from
Right.
this invitation. And we didn't have to sort of, I just felt like we were just trying to be weavers of these beautiful
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
were offered to us.
I love that idea of weaving.
And
Yeah.
this book could be done 200 different ways.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
the collection right now in this moment
It
with
could
these
be a
people.
series.
It could be for the rest of our lives, right? But
We always talk
this
about
is what we
series at the
created.
store, but
Yeah, in this moment. And it's, I
they're
think it's,
going, but wait, there's more.
yeah,
Well, there's always more
yeah.
because the work that is, I don't see the work ending anytime soon. Um, Jacoby, I'm going to jump to you. Can you introduce yourself? Talk a little bit, maybe a nugget of what you brought to the book and then how you thought about taking something that would be helpful to people and sort of condensing it into a chapter of a book.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Jacoby Ballard, and I live in the land colonized as Salt Lake City, Utah. And I've my work has like tried to bring healing work to social justice organizations to be more sustainable in their work to prevent burnout, and then to bring diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice discussions into mindfulness and meditation and yoga spaces and studios and projects that have been reluctant to have some of those really important conversations such that all of us can benefit from those practices, but you have to craft a space in a certain way in order for everyone to actually want to be present and not be harmed there. The chapter I did was called Moving Towards Each Other. and it's about the intersection of forgiveness and accountability. And I came to that because a chapter of my own book, A Queer Dharma, was on forgiveness. And since it came out in 2021, I've done a number of forgiveness workshops and retreats. And over and over again, there was people in my workshops and retreats that had been canceled or publicly shamed, or made a mistake and been kicked out of their community for and I so in this essay I start with two of those stories, and it's just like kept going, and it became an inquiry for me, like, what can forgiveness be a movement tool? Like if our goal is to grow our movements bigger so that we can affect change, because the bigger we are and the more connected we are, then the more change that we can impact. Whereas if we're like calling each other out left and right and throwing each other under the bus and giving up on one another because of our positionality and how we might trigger each other, then we're actually making our movement smaller and less impactful over time. And yeah, it was such a gift that Hala and Tessa really just were like, what do you want to write about? And that's what I wanted to write about. And then the thing I would add also to the process is that we got to read each other's work, and we got to come together in a writer's retreat and kind of talk about what each other was writing about. And so I think that really that process really impacted some cohesion as well.
I'm processing it. Sometimes you're as an interviewer, you're like trying to think of brilliant questions as a person that's talking, and at the same time you're going, yeah, okay. And then it all comes down the pipe at the same time and nothing coherent comes out. But it really resonated to me what you talked about, because I think that I know I've experienced in my own life, like the fear of doing something wrong, in a space that's trying to make change, the fear of hurting somebody because I say the wrong thing, because I don't know everything I need to know yet. Do you have, I was trying to think of, is there like a nugget from what you wrote, or maybe like a short passage that you could share that maybe addresses something, or is something that a passage that you really feel strongly about that you want to share? It doesn't have to be just about what I just said, something that you would like to share.
Sure. I'll read the section that's titled Forgiveness as a Movement Tool. Each of us have been hurt. Each of us has hurt people. We are bound to make mistakes. It's allowable. It's inevitable, especially in proximity. With coworkers, with family, we are going to create hurt because we are human. Undoing inherited norms of harm takes great awareness, attention, and commitment. We are all reckoning with institutionalized, interpersonal, and internalized harm, and so it's bound to be reproduced in our movements. Forgiveness is about how we respond to and heal from the violence that has happened, given that it never should have happened in the first place. We're invited to face the harm head on and use our tools of boundaries, accountability, and forgiveness, which invites the possibility to transform harm into a generative process that restores rather than further fractures relationships and communities. Forgiveness involves vulnerability and nobility, courage and presence, and it moves on its own timeline. You can't force it. I set my intention on forgiveness, for if I cannot offer forgiveness in this moment, I hope to be able to offer it in the future. I incline my heart towards forgiveness. Forgiveness is different than condoning wrongs and different from reconciliation. It's a personal practice of release. It may never lead to reconciling with those who have hurt you or those you have hurt, but it could. I'm curious about what is possible if we lean in rather than turn away when something goes down. As my friend and colleague Susan Raffo told me during a particularly difficult year in a worker-owned cooperative I was part of in Brooklyn, this is the work. It's not a mistake or an accident. This is what you signed up for. A core understanding of forgiveness is that everyone has a basic goodness in them, and we can connect on that holy ground. Hurt people hurt people. When someone is hurting in their own body, heart, soul, they hurt those around them. This compels me to do my healing work as an act of generosity towards those I share greatest proximity with and beyond. And it allows me compassion when harm goes down. Rather than blaming or shaming, I seek understanding. I ask, what underlies these words and actions? Are you doing okay? I'll pause there.
I could sit and process that for the next half an hour. Thank you
Jacoby's
so much for
chapter.
sharing that. But
Jacoby's
I'm going to
chapter.
jump to Vanessa Reyes. And if you could share a little bit about what you contributed to the book and what led you to make the choices that you made and the passages that you, wow, that got all scrambled in my head now too. But if you could talk a little bit about what the work that you do and what your contribution to the book was, that would be lovely.
Yeah, so I actually helped with the first chapter of the book, No Justice, No Peace. And I started in this process as a graduate student, as one of Tessa's students, actually. And we started this, I believe it started before I joined the collective, but I got involved in 2020, so 4 years ago. And I was one of the students that helped facilitate the one-on-one sessions with our community members, the focus groups, the circles. And that's where we really, like Tessa mentioned, we gathered all of the different strengths. We also, the challenges that people were facing in regards to centering healing within the work of social justice. And we really realized that there was a need, but also a want to have this work more involved on a personal and a collective level and organizational level. And so I kind of helped do a lot of like the analysis of the different groups, kind of put together like a summary of like, this is what people are already doing, this is what people want to do, and this is our different ways that it can be done. And yeah, I think what drew me to this work honestly was kind of where I was at in life. I felt like I wanted something more than just like, yes, we need social change. Yes, we need, to change all of these systems that have oppressed people for years and years and centuries. But I felt like there was something missing. And when I learned about healing justice and restorative justice and the work that Tessa was doing, like I just felt like this is what I needed in my work to grow. And it just opened like so many new doors. Like it made me realize that yes, all of this work is important, and yes, the work is urgent, which was expressed also with people within our social justice organizations. But we also, on the flip side, have to take care of ourselves. And as one of the other contributors of this book, Kazuhaga, says, like healing and self-care is like a form of resistance. And I feel like what better way to resist and push back against the oppression, the oppressors, and all of the different things that are happening in this world by just stopping and taking care of ourselves. Because something that, if I take away anything from this experience, is that we have to take care of ourselves in order to continue doing this work in the long run. Because if we burn out, like, how are we going to teach other people to continue this work? Because as much as we want to believe that we're going to get to that perfect world in this life, like the reality is that it's going to continue on even once we pass. And so for myself and for a lot of people that I've worked with, like we want to make sure we're taking care of ourselves holistically so that we could then share our knowledge, share our experiences with others, like future generations, so that they could continue those movements and hopefully one day end up in that perfect world that we're hoping for.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite sort of self-care piece that you took away from all the work that you've done with people that you really turn to when things get crazy and you need to just step away?
Yeah, I feel like I've always considered myself to be an introvert, but I realized after this that I feel very whole and happy and at peace when I'm in community. And of course, it depends different communities bring on different vibes and different emotions, but within the right community, I feel very held and just I leave feeling fulfilled and even more energized. So
Yeah.
that's definitely one that I came away with. And just also creative expression. I feel like that's sometimes not talked about a lot. And I feel like dancing, singing, different crafts and arts and different forms of expression have also really helped me in my healing journey and my experience in like kind of preventing the burnout in my own personal life.
Yeah. Do you have a short piece that you wanted to share? That's totally optional. You don't have to read if you're not up for it tonight. I probably should have checked with everybody ahead of time. So
Yeah, there's actually just a small section that I was just reading before I came on that kind of, in my opinion, really highlighted the importance of this work. Um, and so I'll just go ahead and read this short paragraph. Um, I don't want them to feel like they're alone, like I was alone once. So that stresses me a lot. I can't help but to feel like I've been there. I know what they're going through. I know what it feels like not to have no one to turn to or not to understand something. So sometimes it's just, with them calling late night or texting me at night or calling me crying, I remember. There were times I called people myself. I still cry today. Um, and that to me just really resonates because it's not just us doing this work, it's not just a job. Like a lot of us, we've been through the things that we're trying to help people get through. And that also is, I think, part of the reason why there's such a huge sense of urgency, but also the huge sense of taking care of ourselves because this work can be triggering. It can bring up a lot of emotions, and it's our own community that is going through this that we're working with. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
thank you very much. Tessa, you also have a contribution to the book in addition to doing the editing. How did you decide what to contribute? Did you kind of wait until you saw like places there needed to be like a piece that fit two other pieces together, or did you kind of know at the beginning what you wanted to contribute?
So the chapter that I worked on is the same as Vanessa. We worked because she and the other students that I worked on we worked it together as a collective. And but I also like my fingerprints are all over this. I worked on
Yeah.
the acknowledgments, the introduction, and a ton of editing. So I feel like I was just in it in so many ways, and it was a really deep process to be so involved, not only with my own writing,
Yeah.
but the writing of others, and really be in conversation with them. Like Jacoby said, there's just a lot of conversations about the work and the process and us all coming to figure out what we wanted to say. And
Yeah.
it was a really beautiful collective process. But the introduction was something like it poured out of me. I woke up, I came to the computer and it just came. And that's often how my most hopefully authentic work often comes,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
at 3 a.m. I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's
Okay, if
there's a
I don't get
download.
this out right now.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
doesn't even feel like necessarily the mine. It's a download coming through me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
just get there and pass it through. And um, so that there was a lot of that with the acknowledgments and the introduction that just sort of like came through. And then also, yes, folks had written, and I was able to work with them and with Hala, like how we're gonna keep the puzzle pieces all together
Yeah.
in some way, but also not try to make it uniform. Like we were just,
Right.
really okay with it. Also not trying to be a polished, total, perfect puzzle because there's different pieces and people will take what they want and they'll dive into a different
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
And
I often appreciate whether they're fiction anthologies or nonfiction anthologies, being able to not read through it from
yeah,
cover to cover, but just like flip through and say, oh, hey, that resonates right now. I'm going to read this chapter and maybe something else
yeah,
we'll read later. And
for sure.
um, one of the audience thanked you, Claudia. They really enjoyed what you shared. Um, I am curious where you have gone. So everything gets written down, it comes out in a book. How has that have you been able to use the book then as a tool to go in and do, I don't know if you'd call them a workshops or just working with organizations? Has it allowed you to work with people like more broadly than maybe you would have before?
I mean, it's lovely just now that it's out in the world, people are coming up to us. We had a book reading here in Los Angeles where some of us are based, and folks came up to us and were like, I work for the Department of Children Family Services. We need this. Can you come, can we talk? Can we do things? So we're getting people who are just coming and hearing about it and asking, and we're in the beginning of conversations with amongst us as authors, like, what would we want to do? How could we turn this into some more workshops or trainings? But and it's only been, you know, a couple months since it came out, but I will say that Vanessa and I and some others in our local community are coming together and doing a book club, and it's been
Oh,
so
that's neat.
lovely. And we do
Yeah.
practices and shared practices, and it's not like a traditional book club where we're like analyzing each text. We're just really trying
Yeah.
to life together, and it's been really lovely to put it into action in that way. So we're
Yeah.
really encouraging communities to do this together. Like, it's meant to be a community of practice type of book,
Right,
not like
right.
I mean, you might sit in your bed and like, but it's also about like putting it into conversation with each other. So we're hoping that communities will do that. And then we're also beginning to think about responding to the folks who are like, yeah, we want more. What could you do with this? And
Yeah.
emerge.
I think what resonated with me when you first reached out was just, I don't think you even have to be involved in nonprofit work for this kind of a book to touch you, because I feel like waking up and seeing that the world seems like it's on fire every day. I've definitely found myself just, wow, just feeling overwhelmed and feeling like there's no way that anything I ever do is gonna matter because the problems are so big. And of course, as soon as you go down that road, you're not doing anything in the world because you're just frozen. And so I feel like this book kind of reaches beyond people who are working in organizations even, and to people like me who are just like, okay, take care of yourself, yes, but then, get up and go do something. But I think I really appreciated the perspective that we do have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to take care of other people. It kind of reminded me of when I was a mom with a new baby and people are like, go out and do something for yourself. I usually didn't listen to them and realized later that they were actually right and I should have done that. But yeah, I think it comes to anytime you're serving in other people in any capacity, if you're not taking care of yourself, ultimately you're not helping them either.
And I think you're right. I don't think you have to be an activist to have this speak to you. I think there's things in each chapter that you can take away for your day-to-day life, your understanding of self, relationship, and how you move in the world, and to not get overwhelmed and think that you can't make change just because that's not part of your job or even your personality, because there's so many micro practices we can do that contribute to the macro impact for change and justice and liberation.
I really appreciated what you said about or Vanessa, I'm sorry, what you said about the perspective that the work isn't going to finish with you. I think we do get the perspective of we really need to fix this and we need to fix it right now, when that's probably not realistic. And there's something freeing about saying, I'm not going to fix it all right away, but I'm going to take that next step. And then somebody else is also going to take the next step and somebody else is going to take the next step. So I really appreciated you saying that. Is there anything that you would hope that, and this is a question for everybody, that you would, I guess, main thing that you would hope that maybe an organization might pick up from this work and take away from it? And then also from the other perspective of an individual reading the book, is there something that you hope that they will take to heart, just from the practice of reading the book and maybe working through the workbook.
I think I could speak a little bit on the organizational level. I feel like I say this all the time that this comes up, but I am very privileged and grateful to work for an organization that has weaved into the structure the need for, centering ourselves as humans first and our well-being. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations don't do. And I don't think it's necessarily because they don't want to, it's just, it's not common. I feel like a lot of the time, specifically nonprofits, unfortunately, kind of tend to run very similar to for-profit organizations and kind of fall into like the nonprofit industrial complex. And we get stuck, in the work and in the finances and raising money and this and that we forget about like why we're doing the work in the first place. And I think to do that, you have to kind of stop, slow down, and restructure the organization, which is definitely easier said than done, but not impossible. And I think that is something that we try to emphasize a lot with the organizations that we worked with, is that if this is something that you want, like it is possible. It is going to be hard work and it might take some time, but it is important to change the structure of an organization to make sure you're including spaces to take care of yourself. And it could be as small as asking somebody before you start your work meeting, like, how are you doing today? Like making sure that they have the capacity to talk about what you need to talk about that day. And if possible, also, saving funds or raising funds for your staff and for your members' well-being. So our organization has thankfully had the opportunity to raise funds for all of us, and we call it like our staff wellness fund. So we each get a certain amount of money every year to use on anything for our well-being, whether it be a massage, whether it be a day at the spa, a day, for a concert, or if we need money for car problems, like anything, like we can use that funds. And then we also have funds for the community where if they don't have money themselves for therapy, like we have that for them. And so I think it's like small little things that organizations could start to implement that could really make a difference to centering well-being within the structure, the individual, and like the community as well.
Go ahead, please.
To add on, thank you, Vanessa. It was really beautiful, and to hear about the organization that has that. So excited to learn more. I'm thinking of something that another one of our colleagues, Teo Drake, often says, which is that the conditions of the world and the impact on my community compels me to practice. And then my practice compels me to turn back towards the world and do something. And that's something that I would hope that both individuals and organizations would get out of this book. That like we need these practices if we care about this work so much. Like Vanessa is saying, that we need to practice, we need to restore ourselves, we need to rest as resistance, right? And if we're really working our practices, it's opening our hearts, and it's making us more sensitive, and increasing our ethical practices to approach the world in a more disciplined way from this place of the nervous system being at rest. And we know that if the nervous system's at rest, we can be visionary and imaginative and creative. And that's what we need for the world's problems.
Something that occurred to me as you were talking, Vanessa, is it would be lovely to see this expand beyond nonprofits. I was just thinking even the place that, working at Vintage, and I've experienced that from the people that are the owners and the family that owns it, of, are you okay? Make sure, go home if you need to, take care of that, that it's very centered on making sure everybody's okay first. And And I would love to see more businesses practice that in addition to nonprofits. Do you see application for some of these practices beyond just the nonprofits?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the subtitle of systems change, we're hoping the whole systems,
Yeah, yeah,
all education, healthcare, housing, like we hope everything
yeah,
would adopt this stance. So it really is about systems change. We're operating from where we come from. So we're
yeah,
talking a
yeah,
little bit more on the sort of activist nonprofit, but it really is transferable, I think,
yeah,
to all
yeah,
systems, all organizations, and even just like neighborhoods, groups, communities,
right,
churches, temples, I mean, it's just where people gather to do work together,
right.
to live.
It seems to me that it's really just about people working together in a way that takes care of people better at its heart. And so,
And, we are already interconnected. The myth is of separation. We are connected. So it's really like uplifting and strengthening and claiming that and not
right.
falling into the isolation and toxic sort of separations and segregations that systems will,
Yes.
shun us.
Like to convince us that we're really doing it by ourselves when of course we aren't. Do
Evidence
any
by
of you?
this book, Collective Process.
Yes. And I would actually highly recommend it to everybody because it does, I mean, you got little snippets tonight with the reading and I really appreciate that. But I think, when both of you were reading, I was like, okay, and you could just keep reading. We'll just go for a couple hours. We just read. So I hope everybody will take a chance to check it out. Before we go tonight, can you all share, if it's relevant for you, if there are places to find you online that are, if you've got a public facing social media or website. Jacoby, you mentioned another book that you have done. If you could talk about that a little bit, people can find it. Just if you've done other work or if you've got social media accounts that are like public facing, I would love to include those in the description of the video when I put it up tonight. Do you want to go first, Jacoby?
Sure. I'm on Instagram, just Jacoby Ballard. And I have a website, jacobyballard.net. And my book is called A Queer Dharma, Yoga and Meditations for Liberation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
The
Tessa.
chapter that Jacoby started in this will be the seed of his next book. So keep an eye.
Yay. Oh, that's exciting. It's nice to have it have a thread. That's really cool. Vanessa, do you have any public facing social media that you work on? Or if you want to share the organization that you work for, if you don't have the public facing stuff, that's fine too.
Yeah, I've yet to create social media specifically.
That's okay.
But I am currently working with Gente Organizada, which is a nonprofit in Pomona, California. And we are a youth-led organization working with youth and immigrant families in the city. So if y'all visit us on the website, I'm sure my information's on there. And we also have a director of healing justice who does a lot of this work with the organization. So yeah, find me there.
Thank
I also
you.
have a LinkedIn. I'm not on there much, but I'm sure I'll eventually
That's
get.
okay. No, yes. Um,
And we have a
being
book
on social
website.
media is not necessarily a requirement.
We have
Sometimes
a book
it's
website
sort of,
where you can
go
find.
ahead.
I was just saying, on our book website, you can find all the authors and then
Okay.
to their different things. So it's just practicingliberationbook.com.
Okay.
People can find.
And that's what it is on Instagram too for the book, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Sometimes being on social media is antithetical to self-care, so not being on it is not necessarily a bad thing. Is there a place that we can find you, Tessa?
TessaHicksPeterson.com, and I have other books and things that people can find there. But again, yeah, the practicingliberationbook.com is also where you can find everybody. So.
Okay. And I will try to post all that information. Nobody has to write it down yourself. I'll put it in the description of the video on YouTube so that you can all find it there, and you can refer back to it later if you would like. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here tonight. It was fun. And honestly, I'm sitting here, my brain is whirring behind me in the background, which is always a bad thing because then when I'm trying to talk, it never works. But if anybody is interested in maybe pursuing some kind of a workshop or some further work in this that's hosted by the bookstore, let us know, because that's kind of what's whirring in the back of my brain too. So we will think about how we can maybe make that happen. For upcoming events, Vintage Books Live is going to be on break for a couple weeks. We've got book fairs and stuff coming up, so I decided that probably trying to do all of it together was a bad idea. We'll be back in 3 weeks. And we also have a book launch party on the 19th for Curtis Chen. The third book in his Kangaroo series is coming out, so join us that day at 2:00 in the afternoon for that. Thank you all again so much for being here, and I look forward to talking to you again at some point.
Thank you so much to you and to Vintage Books. We're really excited to share this with you all.
Have a good night, everybody.